Good morning. This is Pat O'Connell calling to order the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission regular open meeting of Thursday, April 18th. It's 10 a.m. Appearing as Scott Cameron this week is Erica Avila Stefans. So could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Allison,
Present.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Present.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Present.
All three commissioners are present and we have a quorum.
Thank you. So next item is and commissioners, we've got the agenda that was posted Monday morning. Do you have any proposed changes to that agenda, or would you like to proceed as is?
I don't have any changes.
I have no suggested changes either.
Great. So then I will move to adopt the agenda that was posted as the agenda for this meeting.
Second.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Allison.
Aye.
The vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next up is public comment. Mr. Rodriguez, has anyone registered for online comment?
Mr. Chair, we do not have anyone registered for comment for this meeting.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the room that would like to provide public comment? Okay, so seeing none, we'll move on to announcements. Ms. Stefans, do we have any announcements from Office of General Counsel?
We do not.
Then just in the spirit of trying to highlight opportunities for people to participate in what we do or see what's going on, just note that there is a separate public comment session today. It starts at 2:00 this afternoon. The topic of that public comment is the PNM's grid modernization application. So that's case 22-00058 UT. Again, that starts at 2:00. If you're interested, go to our webpage, figure out how to register, and we will be here accepting public comment in person. And then tomorrow, looking forward to a workshop presentation tomorrow afternoon, starting at, I believe it's at 1:30, where the electric IOUs are going to come in and give us an update on how they see their readiness for the upcoming summer heating season. And you know, it's funny, we were trying to pick a date for that, and it's supposed to be 80 degrees in Albuquerque today, so it feels like we are on time with that one. So again, that'll be on YouTube. If you'd like to come and listen in person, we'll be doing that here in the Bocum building. And then a hearing before our next regular open meeting begins on Tuesday morning, April 23rd, and that's the hearing in there's a second hearing in PNM's grid mod application case. So that's case number 22-0058 UT. Commissioners, did you have any other announcements you'd like to make?
I do have one announcement that I would like to make. So I want to thank and congratulate one of our staff members who is going to be leaving, Miguel Lujan, who's walking. Oh, actually, he's back there. He got a job as the chief information officer somewhere in Albuquerque. I guess I don't know exactly the company or agency, but it sounds like a great opportunity. And so I want to take some time to just recognize him, because he has been very essential to the work that we do here at the PRC. One of the most impressive things about Miguel is that he's an NMSU graduate, and we all know that's And he actually started in 2008 as a pipeline engineer, which I did not know. And so that is impressive as well. So he has a degree in engineering and computer technology, and he transitioned to the systems manager 4 in 2011. And then we all remember when we had to switch over to remote work during COVID, and Miguel was essential in that plan. He mentioned that they had to deploy the entire agency to laptops and transition the entire server cages overnight in September 2020, and that they worked doing that until 4 a.m. And he also mentioned that he received comp time for that. So that's what it takes to receive comp time. Working until 4 a.m. So, you know, and obviously figured out the streaming of the meetings and the technology here that we need to offer the flexibility for hybrid, and to make sure that our meetings are forever saved on YouTube. Not sure that's an accomplishment, but at least for me. You know, like moving to the Bochum building was another thing. He mentioned that the Bochum building didn't have any network fibers coming into it, or other technologies. And so the other thing about Miguel is that he has lasted through 18 commissioners and 8 chiefs of staff, which is also very impressive. So we'll, you know, definitely miss Miguel, but thank him very much for his public service.
Thank you for that announcement, and also heartfelt thank you to Miguel for everything he said.
Certainly, Miguel has always been there whenever I've had an issue, and I'm sure all of us at the PRC can say the same thing. So thank you for your service, Miguel. You know, I would like to bring up one announcement, and that is we've got scheduled on May the 15th at 9:30 a.m. a continuation in our workshop series on grid modernization and integrated distribution planning. We'll be focusing on cost benefit analysis, and we'll have an expert guest speaker to help lead us in that conversation.
Thank you for that. Okay, so with no further announcements, we'll move on to approval of prior meeting minutes. We had a draft in the package, and I've been working on an edit for that, because if you'll remember the consent agenda, there was an item I was recused from, so I tried to get the edit minutes edited to show that I did not vote on consent item utility matter C1, but I don't know if I've accomplished that or not. But anyway, other than that edit, I'm ready to approve those minutes. Didn't know if commissioners, if you had any other edits, or you're ready to approve those minutes.
Yeah, that change makes sense. I don't see it in my copy, but we do need to make sure that that's in there. I don't have anything further.
I don't have any comments on those notes.
Thank you. So I'll move that we approve the minutes for March 21st as edited in board effect.
I second.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Allison.
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a consent action agenda with 3 transportation cases and 7 utility cases. Commissioners, do you have any questions, discussion on the consent action items?
I don't, no, thank you.
None for me either.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to point out that we're closing a docket for a case that opened in 1996. So many of our staff weren't even in high school at that point. And then another is one of the issues, and it's on consent agenda, was party didn't respond to commission order, and they said it's because the certificate of service had an email address for an employee who had retired. And so that's a utility. So just reminder to everybody, especially utilities, it's your job to keep the certificate of, or the list of contacts up to date. And then I'd also, and this was a co-op, I'd recommend a buddy system, so you have at least 2 emails, so things don't just go into a black hole. But with that, I'd move that we adopt the potential orders on the consent agenda.
I second.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
and Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The vote passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. So on our regular action agenda, we start with 2 transportation matters, both with presentations from Katie Lang, who I know she's here, but must be in the antechamber. The floor is yours.
Hello. This is the most expedient time of staff's time in the commissions. And I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you for that. Commissioners, do you have any questions or discussion on this item?
Yeah, I just want to say, I certainly appreciate staff's efforts to bring this forward. I've discussed this at length at a previous meeting. I think ultimately for me, the petition needs to be supported by evidence. And I just don't see any evidence aside from a blanket statement that the motor carriers are operating. And so I want to encourage staff to include those details. I think that is what is necessary to demonstrate that there is a violation. This order gives staff an opportunity to bring any of these issues back if they're supported by evidence. But I also want to note that the transportation division responsibilities are leaving this building, and these expired contracts have, or invalid contracts as they're referred to, have not been effective for many, many years. And so I would see little purpose in, at this point, given the transition of the transportation responsibilities to the Department of Transportation, penalizing those motor carriers. If there is a situation that is egregious, where they just haven't been working with staff, I appreciate staff's efforts and would love to support them in that. But I also think that as an agency, we need to do more work ahead of time and consider the potential violations that may have been caused. I don't think that some of those necessarily require threats of, potential sanctions. I think there is an opportunity to correct those situations before it's brought to the commission. And so I want to encourage staff to undertake that work. And so thank you. That's it.
So Commissioner Aguilar, if I could just, check my understanding of this. Essentially, staff is assuming that these carriers have been providing unauthorized transportation services under expired certificates and wants us to issue a blanket cease and desist operations to all of them. And your view is that is a very blunt instrument, and it would be much better for staff to find out if they are indeed providing unauthorized transportation services.
Yes, I think, and I think staff had a couple of opportunities to respond to this in the petition, and there was an amended petition, there was a bench request, and there is just a statement that they're operating without authority, but there is no evidence to support that. And I find myself in a situation where I'm being asked to tell somebody to cease and desist what they're doing when I don't actually know that they're doing it. Some of these contracts, as we've discussed before, expired in 2013. And I need to have more evidence in order to actually tell somebody that they need to stop doing that. And especially to threaten them with potential penalties because I have no indication in the record that there is a violation.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's like the Western movie, you shoot them all and let God sort it out.
Right, and you know, so maybe staff has valid reasons that they haven't explained, but that's the problem here. And so that's why I support this order, is that it needs to be explained for the commission to take an action. I think this is the level of thought that we put into any petition. And we need evidence to take an action.
I think, yeah, I appreciate that explanation and I agree with it. And then I think it's worth it to work through that explanation, especially in this interesting case where there's a automatic backstop where the reset button is coming soon, whether we do anything with this or not. So thank you, Ms. Lang, and thank you, Commissioner Aguilera. I would move to adopt the order denying the petition without prejudice.
I second.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Allison.
Aye.
Vote passes unanimously.
Next up is a mini case number case.
Commissioners, the next docket numbers before the commission is also something that the commission is not a stranger with. We've seen this case before. It is the case where there was a major cleanup for motor carriers providing services that have not filed their annual reports with the commission. It totals about 1,000 or so motor carriers. We saw this case earlier, actually late last year, where the staff initially petitioned the commission to revoke the warrants. However, the commission at that stage found it in the public's interest to provide these motor carriers with a way to come into compliance. And we gave them some time to do that so far. And let me backtrack. And along the way, we required staff to provide updates as to if any of these motor carriers listed in these various dockets would actually come to compliance. So far, only one has. Several of them have been either suspended or canceled under other docket numbers for lack of financial responsibility. Some have voluntarily canceled their own warrants. So we have we still have the great majority of these motor carriers are still non-compliant. OGC has drafted an order to staff to send out notices of hearing to take place at the May 16 open meeting. And for staff to prepare an update to for a list of who's compliant, who's not compliant, and who's going to be facing the hearing. That is the order that is before the commission if the commission chooses to adopt it. And I am ready for any questions.
Thank you. I don't have any questions on the presentation or the draft order. Commissioners, do you have questions for Ms. Lang?
Mr. Chair, yes, I do. Ms. Lang, this order would establish a hearing only for those companies that have not filed annual reports on a timely manner. Is that correct? What about other areas of non-compliance, such as if a carrier doesn't have insurance?
It would not be, we would not be discussing insurance at this point. It's not about financial responsibility. It's just, it would just focus on the warrants issue.
Would the financial responsibility insurance be handled in a different manner?
Yes. They are, currently, we have an ongoing docket number where staff goes through, motor carriers who have not been up to date with their insurance information for 4 consecutive months. And we go in and clean up the docket, and we either revoke or cancel as we go along. So that's being taken care of in the separate ongoing docket number.
Is, this hearing and potential, revocation of operating license, is that the only instrument we have available for report filing non-compliance? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, to me, that it also seems maybe a bit harsh to cancel someone's operating license because they haven't filed an annual report. That seems like, a much smaller infraction than, say, not carrying insurance.
It could potentially be, I don't disagree, but it does, the commission is by rule and statute, authorized to do that, because annual reports, every motor carrier has to, file their annual reports except for, ambulance services. And we are able to, because when a motor carrier doesn't file their annual report with the commission, there's a presumption that they're not providing continuous service, which is part of the cornerstone. So so that goes back to that.
Okay, I would be interested in exploring something a little less drastic than a cancellation or revocation of these carriers' license.
May I say something? The option would be for the carriers to attend the hearing, and if they have been not responsive to us prior, because we have been sending notices like, please, file this, and they have kind of not been responsive. At the hearing, they will be able to tell us why that shouldn't be done and come into compliance. So the hearing is actually a way for any carrier on the list to, I guess, clear up the record.
But if they don't appear at the hearing, then the intent would be to
Revoke, yes. I think, I don't know if this would assuage any hesitance, but we did give them, I think, I can't remember, was it 60 days or 60 days or 90 days after the initial meeting, where we did contact them again and say, hey, we had a presentation with the commission. You're on this list. Please, contact us and file these annual reports. And only one actually filed their annual reports, and some of them actually, a good number of them actually voluntarily surrendered their warrants. So there's a good chance that I think it's a good indicator that our notices did reach a number of these carriers, or a good number of these carriers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, isn't it true that this list that we've got at this point is a very small list compared to what we started with? I think the list in the footnote in page 2 is where we started. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so if you'll recall, Commissioner, we've had several cases over 6 months of giving people multiple opportunities to step up. Some have revoked their warrants. We're down to a very small tag end that have not. And so going back to the previous case, you know, this is where motor carriers, they're carrying human beings in their vehicles. It's a service that includes public safety, inability to just do the minimum, like file a report, is evidence that maybe you shouldn't be trusted to drive people around. So we've given multiple opportunities. This hearing is the last opportunity to just show up and say, yes, I'm doing this, and please don't cancel my warrant. My experience watching these hearings over the years is I'd kind of be surprised if any of them show up. So that's just, we're at the end of the process. They've had multiple chances without the action being taken. The companies that didn't want the action to be taken have already responded. So within the concept of this has been a long process, this totally makes sense to me in this moment.
Oh, Ms. Lang, can you clarify one thing, that with respect to those that don't have insurance, we have explicit authority to cancel that
Yes, we do.
without a hearing,
Correct.
whereas with the annual reports, that authority is not explicit, and council has determined that we most likely need a hearing
That is correct.
in order to cancel. So
That is
that's one difference between the other situation. You know, I do think there are similarities and differences between the other case that we just discussed. I think one thing that is the same is, and I guess I'll phrase this as another question / comment for Ms. Lang. Is it the case that upon the transition, so on July 1, these carriers would need to apply with the New Mexico Department of Transportation to get a new permit certificate?
Yes, I would assume so, yes, because the authority would lie with the DOT by then.
So in a way, it also, you know, is the same situation where we're doing something here at the end when it's not really going to matter much, because let's say, for example, that these motor carriers don't exist. They won't show up to our hearing, but they also won't show up to the New Mexico Department of Transportation to seek new authority.
I think that's a likely outcome, yes.
And I think part of the reason why we're in this situation is because we started this a while ago. And, you know, some of these were filed in October, and at that time, it made more sense to have them file their annual reports. Whereas sitting here in, what month are we in? April? It doesn't make as much sense.
And how many companies are now on that list?
I think we started around 1,200 or 1,300. I'm assuming we still have maybe around 1,000. I'm doing a rough. Yeah,
Okay.
I would assume so.
Right. Well, you know, you know, obviously annual compliance reports are, not filing them is a much smaller infraction than not having insurance, and certainly I think our rules do reflect that. You know, it would be nice to have a way to get these reports without having a hearing and threatening revocation of operating permits, but I do understand that this has been a process, and I guess that's what we're left with at this point. So
Any other questions, discussion? Then I'd move for approval of the potential order regarding staff's petition.
a second.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. And I just had one more discussion item on this that didn't want to get ahead of approval, but when we're building the agenda for the meeting with this hearing, my experience has been the hearings would come before consent agenda. And again, expectation that we'll open the hearing, invite parties to provide their evidence, make a decision, and close the hearing. And that, again, expectation is almost none of these folks will show up. That's where I would propose to put this on the agenda for the next meeting. It's before consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, utility matters. We have SPS's motion regarding its 2023-2025 energy efficiency plans. Ms. Stephens.
So this is returning from our last open meeting, so I won't do a full presentation. Before the commission for consideration and discussion are two orders. The first order accepts SPS's application of the UCT and allows the ICO program, interruptible credit option program, to go into effect. And it grants all the other requests as well. And then the order 2 denies SPS's application of the utility cost test. And so denies the motions as it relates to the ICO program. And it requires SPS to refund its forecasted plan year 2023 underage.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions or discussion?
Yeah, for the second order that denies the interruptible credit option, can you please explain the basis for the denial?
Sure. So in the order that denies the ICO program, it states that the utility cost test must incorporate all the costs incurred by SPS for the ICO program. And historically, that is the way the commission has applied the UCT. It has incorporated all of the costs for a program in the UCT calculations.
And so then is it the case that those costs would not be included?
They are not included in the current portfolio. They would be included in a next triennial plans portfolio.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess that's sort of what I want to drill down on. The costs would be included.
They would be.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say that of the two options, I'm in favor of order 2 for a couple of reasons. First of all, I want to thank SPS for bringing a solution to a problem to us. I thought, and then I also acknowledge that was a solution that we encouraged with the rate case. Having said that, the problem is bigger than just that one issue. We're over collecting arguably energy efficiency amounts. And so, like we talked about last meeting, bias towards let's get that money back in customers' hands as soon as possible. But then the bigger picture is this issue with the utility cost test on this one program. I don't think is unique to that one program. So if avoided capacity cost was 0, then it was 0 for everything. So and then a lot of these programs, my experience, can be complementary. You can save money through communication channels, through outreach, those type of things. So adding something is kind of a one-off on something that should be viewed as a program is a little concerning to me. But the big thing is, again, just I want to see a full slate of programs that has a real avoided capacity cost calculation in it. So one of the things I would like to emphasize that's in order too is encouragement for SPS to request variance to file your next energy efficiency plan sooner. So the concept there is just from where we're at, come in and ask for a 4-year plan sooner than what the normal cycle would say, just because obviously things have changed on SPS's system. The changes have warped their energy efficiency program. So just adding another program to spend some money is a little concerning, but the bigger concern is the program should be designed to benefit the customers, and there's clearly avoided capacity benefit on offer. So I want to see that flow through the whole program design, not just this one concept that they're bringing to us now. So anyway, that's why I'm in favor of order 2.
So, just a few comments about this one. I'm also leaning towards order 2 here. One reason is that at least I don't feel that I have enough information about this demand response or ICO program, as it's being called, to fully understand it and make a decision on it here. It would be preferable to see it really fully discussed and elaborated in a 3-year program plan. Also the novel aspect of, gee, this program would cause us to have a utility cost test that goes below 1 and is not allowed. So let's create a regulatory asset and let's move those costs to the future in a future 3-year program. It's just not something that has been done before, and it just feels like a little too much creative accounting for me. I think it's a lot cleaner to do the things that clearly need to be done, the reduction of the collections to the 3%. And I think it makes a lot of sense to not only do the refund for the 2022 overages, but to do the refund for the 2023 overages. I think part of the reason for the company's request to make a regulatory liability out of those 2023 overages is because first it would pair with their regulatory asset that they wanted for the program costs so that they could be put into this future period. And also at the time of the filing, which I believe was October, SPS didn't know how much the overage would be for 2023. Now that we're in April, they should know, and it should be a historical number, not a forecasted number. And so I think, having the same treatment for the 2023 overages as the 2022 overages makes sense. And those are the reasons I think that order 2 is the better order.
So I'll respond to those because I support the first order. Some of the reasons that you mentioned, I think, could be convincing to me with respect to the details. I think refunding the money back would also have been a just and reasonable proposal by the utility. However, I don't support the explanation in the order for the denial. I don't think it's correct. The order rejects the this is a load management program that would allow the utility to interrupt service during tight system conditions. And the customers who would be interrupted would first need to agree that the discount is beneficial to them. And so this program would be mutually beneficial to them, but also to the system during tight system conditions. And I think this is especially important to note, given the growth that SPS is experiencing and will continue to experience. So I do think there is a lot of value in the program itself. I think that the program is also consistent with the statute that tells us that the commission shall approve utility acquisition of cost-effective energy efficiency and load management resources to be in the public interest. And the order denies the program because of when the costs are being incurred. And as we've established already, the cost will be incurred and will be taken into account. It's just the order takes issue with the time period. And I think that it reads, and so the utility cost test standard is met if the utility's cost to develop, acquire, and operate energy efficiency or load management resources on a life cycle basis are less than the avoided costs associated with developing, acquiring, and operating this associated supply side resources. I think that the order reads into the statutory language a limitation placed by the phrase on a life cycle basis to determine when the costs need to be incurred. And I believe this reading is incorrect. I think if I'm being generous, I think the reading is too prescriptive and not aligned with the spirit of the energy efficiency rule. That the commission provide public utilities to make load management more attractive than the utility than supply side resources. And again, I think given the situation that SPS is in with all of the growth, I think this is one of the solutions that we should be looking at to avoid building additional capacity and resources to meet peak demand. So, I think that we would be being a little bit too nitpicky here as far as the statute is concerned, because we're picking on when the costs are being incurred. And I don't think that's in the spirit of the statute. And I also don't think that is consistent with our practice. I mean, we commonly approve regulatory liabilities and regulatory assets. So it's not uncommon or novel to consider the costs at a different time period, or charge the costs at a different time period. So I think it would, the first order is well within the flexibility that is prescribed to us in the statute. And so the last thing that I'll note is that SPS states that it's going to defer the cost regulatory asset until SPS demonstrates that the ICO program can be cost effectively implemented into the portfolio. It sounds to me like customers are protected. There has to be a demonstration that it's cost effective. And so I think that the first order is more appropriate in this case.
Yeah, I agree that I'd prefer to have this a program that reduces the need to add capacity in the upcoming thing up and running and included. And I also agree that we're being too nitpicky here. The idea that this one thing has to have a UCT greater than 1 is frankly not true. The UCT should be viewed on the basis of the plan, not each individual program. And so one of the things that led me to order 2 was just being offended by the idea that the UCT is somehow an unsettled concept. Through many iterations of energy efficiency plans, that's been adjudicated over and over again. So trying to crack open UCT so that SPS's solution is acceptable, I think does damage to energy efficiency programs as a whole. So I didn't want to reverse that precedent of how UCT has been calculated, is calculated, and that you look at the whole plan, not individual programs when you're judging UCT. So that was secondary reason for why I lean toward order 2.
Yeah, you know, I think as I read the statute, it's telling us incentivize the utility to not build more. And I think customers benefit from that because we can either reduce demand and avoid procuring more generation and building more infrastructure, or we can refund the money in this situation, but then we put the utility in a situation where they may need to expand the system, procure more generation. So how are customers better off? And so I'm taking this statute as a guide to tell me customers are better off if we don't have to procure more, well, the utility, and then, you know, charge a return on that.
I appreciate that, and I hear that argument. My argument is customers are better off if energy efficiency plans can get approved in a expeditious basis. And it took a long time to get people to agree how to calculate cost benefit and UCT. And so I'm afraid of creating a bump in that road. So it's holistically energy efficiency versus demand response programs, and approving a demand response program because the moment demands it in a way that creates uncertainty and ambiguity that doesn't exist now in energy efficiency plans.
You know, I guess my impression here is that, you know, the reason SPS proposed this novel mechanism of, you know, realizing costs and benefits of a program in the future is because, you know, as they defined the avoided cost of generation as 0, and they fought hard for that definition in this case. This program would therefore be all costs and no benefit according to, you know, what they've established, and that as a portfolio, it would cause the UTC to go below 1. And that's why they proposed this whole mechanism. And, clearly it feels like, the whole demand response program was kind of invented here as a way to spend some more money. I absolutely agree that demand response programs are important. I agree that they need to be considered and ought to be planned for. I just have some issues with the way it's being done here. I would prefer that they file for another 3-year plan early to really allow us to fully consider the program and not have these complexities. And I still think creative accounting with realizing in a future plan the benefits and costs of a program that they want to implement now.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll emphasize is that I'm largely reacting to the reasons in the order to deny this. I'm hearing, valid reasons that I agree with, but I don't see that in the order. And that's part of my struggle here.
It's funny because that's why I'm objecting to the reasons in order 1. So it's like, what we're in agreement is we would love to see a demand response program that's based on actual avoided capacity ASAP. How do we do that without damaging the process that exists to get energy efficiency and demand response programs approved is where I'm at. And so sounds like we need more clarity in the orders that are out there. And I don't know if this is a resolvable thing, if that's just what ends up being the commission's policy choice, right? Is which road to go down. And then my belief is we can't order them to come in early, right? What we're doing is encouraging them to ask for a variance in order to and again, I appreciate that SPS brought this solution forward. What the holdup is the justification for approving their request. I think their justification's bad and dangerous. Even though the result might be good.
Right. And I think the method of getting to that result, while it may be novel, I think it's consistent with the spirit of the statute. And also, I think reasonable. I'm not reading anything in the statute, and I know this is what the order argues, but I'm not reading anything in the statute that would preclude it. And so it's novel, but I think it's something that we can accept.
Yeah. I've just spent too many years fighting over what the statute means in energy efficiency that I'm with the spirit of the precedent, I guess, not the statute. And it's not the spirit of the precedent, it's the actuality of the precedent. And that I agree with you, that doesn't appear in these orders.
Okay, and so is there a specific precedent that we're referencing?
Yeah, the big thing I'm objecting to is the concept that UCT is an unsettled thing, that sometimes you can include costs and sometimes you can't. It's not the timing issue, it's just UCT as a whole. It took a long time to get to people agreeing how to calculate UCT, and then to show up today and say, gee, let's change that and open that box of Pandora's is where I'm afraid to support order one. Be my fears unjustified. I'm just telling you where I'm at. And like I say, I can see either one of these orders being approved, so. The will of the commission will rule here, not O'Connell's fear.
And if I may, Commissioner, paragraph 25 of order 2 explains how the commission has applied the UCT, or basically that the commission has not moved costs from one plan year to the next to assess cost effectiveness under the UCT.
Right, no, I do understand. I just wasn't sure if there was other precedent that I was not aware of.
I don't know if what I'm talking about is precedent. I just know it's practice. So.
For what it's worth, my understanding of the history of this is that previously the commission received annual applications for energy efficiency, and then the utilities requested a triennial process, and that was codified in our rules. So I guess I'm saying that the triennial process is kind of the newer way of doing things, and has some advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. This shows the disadvantage of the triennial process. The advantage was you weren't spending lots of time every year with programs that weren't changing a lot. You're just continuing to roll them over. So there was a huge advantage of going to the triennial process, but it leaves us with a situation where things changed. And so what do you do in the middle of a triennial plan, right? I'm afraid to ask this question, but what's the statutory deadline?
So right now, the advice notice is suspended and we have 6 months. So May 28th is when the advice notice suspension is lifted.
Because I know I'd like to double check what I've been saying here today, that the UCT is an established practice, and then figure out whether that's actually precedent. You know, because I agree with you, Commissioner, you start with the law. And I also agree with staff that this is in the spirit of the law. I'm just afraid of upsetting the process that's been going on since 2007, and I just have too much PTSD from all those years.
Well, I certainly recognize, and I think it's everybody recognizes that this would be a deviation from what has been approved before. That doesn't necessarily make it unjust and unreasonable. I think there are situations where deviations are warranted, and we need to acknowledge them and explain why this situation is distinct. And I think this situation is distinct. given the underage that has been created.
And if we can do that in a way that doesn't cause a redefinition of UCT, I'd be in favor of looking at that.
The other thing that the statute tells us is that we need to act on these quickly. And so, I certainly would, appreciate more time to consider, the comments that have been made today, and maybe we could bring this back.
That's fully understandable and acceptable.
Apologies, SPS. Your reward for trying to solve a problem is I'm gonna move the table.
Second.
Commissioner Allison,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
action is tabled.
And I have just one quick thing, I know that we need to act on these quickly, but, there's also a balance with making sure that we, do right by the public interest. And so I think it's worth in this situation to, take more time.
Yeah, I appreciate that statement. My self-indulgent version of it is that this is the fun things commissioners get to do, right? Struggle with these type of questions, and you never know where they're gonna show up. It could be as simple as let's fix a energy efficiency plan. Okay, so let's move on. Next item, also, Ms. Stephans.
So this one's relatively straightforward. Under our telecom rules, under our telecom rules, the commission must, before May 1st, must open a docket to accept applications for the SRUSF broadband program. And this is the last open meeting before May 1st. So this order opens the docket, and the reason to accept applications and sets a deadline for the submission of application. The reason why it's on the regular agenda item is because it's slightly different than how it's been done in the past. The telecom rules set dates by which the commission must act. What this order does, it aligns the dates that are already in our rules with our regularly scheduled open meetings so that the parties and the commission may prepare for these actions. So it's a procedural schedule as well for the commission to act on these applications. They're under the draft order. There's only one need for a special open meeting, and that would be on October 10th. And the reason for that special open meeting is that our rules set out that the commission must act before October 15th. And the next regular open meeting before October 15th is October 3rd. And as this commission saw last year, that these are, it's a lot of work and a lot to go through. So to give the commission an extra week, a special meeting is proposed for October 10th.
Yeah, thank you for that. One question I had on exactly that paragraph is, can we also decide before October 10th? Because I remember it could be next time through, we'll all have had the experience of last time and won't take as many iterations as it did. But is there any problem with deciding that prior to a special open meeting on it?
No, there is no problem with that. So the regular open meeting would be October 3rd. So the commission's decision on the application would be on that regular open meeting if you decide to change it.
Okay. Well, that was my question, is a change needed for us to then go ahead and notice it and do it October 3rd and then?
Just to the order.
Okay, so it would require a change of
Yeah.
order, okay. And then the other thing, and I think you're addressing a question that I've had previously, is I was kind of surprised at the process where after we award projects, folks could come in and say that project isn't what it says it is. But I think you're telling us with paragraph 14 that's the way it's got to be. Because until somebody's been injured, they can't complain.
That's right. Yes, so that's right. That clarifies that after the commission has made a decision, then you file a motion for reconsideration. But it also clarifies that if you have any information that you would like to provide to staff, you should do that before staff makes their presentation on the applications.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I love that we're laying the deadlines out all the way through to the end now. Thank you.
Yeah, Chairman, thanks for focusing on that. I think that that is a situation that we had last time, is that some parties came in to seeking to correct the information after the staff had made their presentation, and too late after staff had made their presentation. And it did not, that information, whether it was correct or not, did not end up impacting any of the projects we had selected. But I think the point is that if there are corrections to the record, they need to be made earlier, and then we should be made aware of those, when we're getting the recommendations that are being sent to us. And then separately, there's the process that comes after, which is essentially a request for rehearing.
Ms. Stefans, our state rural universal service fund rule also sets out specific dates for this process, correct?
That's right, yes.
And do the dates established in this order go beyond any of those dates, or are they all before?
They are all before.
Okay. That's great, because that would pose a problem if we were asking for something later than established in the rule. But I don't know whose initiative this was. Those are the joys of communicating only in open meetings, but I appreciate the initiative.
It's a mystery to me too, but I appreciate it. I think it's good work by our staff is what
Yep.
that we're seeing there. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so I will move to adopt this order as proposed, with exception of if we could edit paragraph 4 to make it clear that we can decide prior to a special open meeting or at that special open meeting.
Was that paragraph F?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, what I said, but.
Could we make F during an open meeting on or before
Yes.
Yeah.
Thursday, October the 10th? So then we would have the flexibility to make it a special one or a non-special one as. Right.
I second.
Okay, any other?
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
The vote passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. So we've got a presentation from outside party, and so it's on the agenda to start at 1 o'clock. We have at least a couple more cases to go before then, so I'm not sure if we're gonna have a buffer of time before 1 or not. So I was gonna propose that we take a 10-minute recess. 10 minutes sufficient? Okay, so then we're in recess until 11:25. Okay, so we are back. Now we're on utility matters, agenda item number 3. That's a NOPR and presentation from Mr. Linden.
Good morning, Commissioners. Today we have in docket 23-00294, which is the matter of an inquiry into a rulemaking related to public utility compliance with section 62-1810D of the ETA. And for your consideration today is threefold. First, there is a proposed order issuing notice of proposed rulemaking. Second, there is a draft proposed rule for your consideration. And third, there is an alternative draft proposed rule. As for the order or the proposed order issuing notice of proposed rulemaking, this order would commence a formal rulemaking process to adopt a proposed rule issued by this commission. It would start the clock of 18 months to finish the rulemaking officially according to statute. And it would additionally provide dates for public to submit commentary, dates for a public hearing, and it would eventually culminate in a final order, either adopting or rejecting a final rule. The draft proposed rule was, well, let me back up a second. Early in this process, Chairman O'Connell volunteered to be the internal lead on drafting this rule. According to statute 62-1810D, the ETA requires the commission to implement rules to implement the statute. And there's no date specific on that statute. However, there is sort of a soft deadline of January 1st, 2026. Although that's not required by the statute, for other legal reasons, it's wise for us to promulgate a rule before that date. But as I was saying, Commissioner O'Connell took the lead. He assembled a team of McLee Carroll and Arthur O'Donnell. OGC assigned myself to advise on the docket. The informal process that has led to this moment consisted of commentary and workshops. And unfortunately, for the last few months, this item has kind of been put on hold. Around December and January, when we wanted to move forward with this docket, I was consumed with the case that shall not be named. And then I took an extended leave of PTO. So it is now one of my top priorities to get moved along, and I'm sure for Commissioner O'Connell as well. And let's see. Commissioner Ellison, upon review of the materials shared last week, has devised, I think, 2 fairly simple edits to the draft proposed rule. So there is the alternative draft proposed rule for your consideration. And additionally, in a memo circulated earlier this week, I detailed some other potential options that may be taken today. But otherwise, I am available for questioning or to facilitate any discussions that you may want to have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Lundin. And then I guess I'll take suggestions on how you'd like to proceed. I mean, I can explain how the draft rule is what it is, based just from a project manager point of view, or Commissioner Ellison, if you want to explain why you're proposing to edit that. Either way makes sense to me. Or Commissioner Aguilera, if you'd like to start, that's fine too.
Why don't you go first?
Okay, so then I think that makes most sense, as I'll just explain the draft rule and how it came together. Mr. Lundin described the process very well. We had an informal process hoping to draft this NOPR as well as we could, so that now we can head off into a good rulemaking process. So one of the things that's emphasized in the memo, absolutely true, we're not deciding what this rule says today. What we're doing is providing a foundation for the formal process where people will submit comments, we'll have a hearing. So there's a day in the future when we get to say what the rule should say. That's not today. Most of the process the informal process that led up to it, the way I viewed it was extremely valuable. And first of all, seeing that there was quite a bit of consensus, there was cooperation and agreement on the law and what it intends to do. There was disagreement on the scope of it. So some of the things that were discussed in the informal process that are not in this draft rule were trying to make rules that fit a future regional market that doesn't exist right now. And we frankly don't know what the rules are going to be on that yet. So we don't have much in there in terms of market purchases. The other is I'm personally worried that the ability to make off-system sales is a way to circumvent the rule, because you could sell your gas to one party and wash it by buying zero carbon from another. I mean, that's probably a conspiracy theory, but you'll see there's nothing in here about off-system sales. We stuck to the root of the law, which was energy delivered to your customers. So anyway, that process was extremely valuable in narrowing the scope of what's done. And then moving forward, there's a section in here on penalties for compliance. My understanding on that is just if it's not in there now, it's going to be hard to put it in later. So, if it's not noticed as part of the rulemaking, you can't add it later. So that's a section where there's an idea in here about how to pursue that. And I think the value of it is if we just rely on the existing rules and existing statute, there's a lot of ambiguity there. How does it come about? What's the size of the penalty? How to assess the penalty versus the consequence of the noncompliance? None of that's defined if you just rely on the framework that's out there now. So there's a framework in this draft rule, and it's a foundation for people to provide comments. It's an idea. Is it the best idea? Don't know. And today's not the day for me to say that's the best idea. It's let's open up this NOPR and allow people to provide comments. And through that process, hopefully either I'll be convinced on what the best idea is, or the three of us will have options to choose from. If we don't have it in there now, we won't have options to choose from. And one of the options would be, we're not going to add compliance requirements in addition to what already exists in the rule and the law. The other area that is interesting, and you address this in your memo, Mr. Lundin, is whether this is a 3-year compliance. The draft rule says 1 year. If you read the law also says 400 pounds per megawatt hour, which can be interpreted as an hourly requirement. So to me, this is vague. What is the standard of time to which you say that the utility has complied or not? So anyway, draft rule says a year. And then one of the reasons I'm very comfortable with that year is, again, having participated in the informal process that precedes it, but mostly from looking at how PNM tells the world that their goals and compliance ought to be measured. Page 2 of PNM's integrated resource plan shows this law and against a graph of annual emissions. So PNM's telling us that they see this as an annual requirement. PNM also issues a sustainability report once a year. So once a year, they're telling the world what their emissions are. So again, that leads me to annual. So anyway, that's what's in the draft rule. Again, that's an idea. Is it the best idea? I'm going to let the process tell me that. And so that's how we put the draft rule out. And then the bigger concept is, we have adjudicatory processes, which is what we spend most of our time on. Rulemaking is a legislative process, right? So to me, kind of the legislative aspect of this is whether compliance with the law is an active process or is it a passive process? If you look at all the comments we've received from P&M about this so far, that leads me to think they're hoping that this is a passive activity, that let's just find out what the numbers are. We'll report it to you. If we don't comply with the law, oh well. So that's why compliance is important. That's why setting the getting clarity on what the compliance period is important. And then, just as we've been working through this, I'm just concerned that's how P&M is approaching the world. It's kind of a passive approach, because I mean, we're still waiting for P&M to respond to our order in the demand response docket, where they're supposed to file a notice of material change on their integrated resource plan. That's docket number 23-00138. That seems to me like a fairly simple thing to do, but they haven't done it yet. So that tells me, just as a regulator, I need to motivate this as an active compliance activity, and just following P&M's ideas on this lands you in a passive role. So anyway, again, today's the day where we put a draft out there and we get comments on it. I'm hoping the debate that we have today really helps people know where the fertile ground is for providing comments. So in addition to what you see in this draft that you want to comment on, you'll learn more from our conversation today. And so anyway, that's the process that got us to the thing that is in board effect and is listed as the draft order. And then one more thing, just frankly, I was thinking about it in the conference we were at this week, is if we go with a 3-year period, you got the opportunity for things to get pretty far out of whack. The compliance with this rule is going to implicate how much fuel P&M burns. And so if you have a year where they're horrifically out of compliance, and so in order to balance it out over a 3-year period, they do something very expensive, so then they can meet it over the 3-year period. That could lead to this being more expensive. So again, active versus passive. If the window is too long, then we're inviting a situation where not only are we thinking about sanctions or penalties, but we're dealing with a fuel clause that was expensive because we let things get too far away from what the law requires. And again, I could argue the law requires hourly compliance with the 400 pounds per megawatt hour. So anyway, that's the process that led to the draft rule that you've got in front of you. And I would propose that we adopt that version.
So I want to thank all the parties that submitted comments here. I think the comments really show that there is some ambiguity that needs to be sort of delved into, and we need to come away with clear answers and direction. And so I think the parties have very interesting interpretations that, are reasonable at different levels, but they're different. And in this rule as written, I'm concerned that we're not clarifying some of that ambiguity, or at least starting to clarify it, recognizing that this is a NOPR, not a final rule. But I think there is an opportunity to engage with the comments more in the order and come up with a clear way to explain it in the proposed rule. You know, the Chairman, what you were mentioning about whether the requirement is an hourly requirement. I think that interpretation could be supported. On the other hand, the 3-year requirement can be supported as well. And but I don't think we're clarifying that in this rule yet. Or if we were, we're using the same ambiguous language that's in the ETA, and I don't think that's helpful. I think we need to explain it more clearly in our order and in the rule. And so I'm hoping that we could engage more with the comments and be more clear where our starting point is for this NOPR.
Yeah, I guess I need to understand that better. It feels like a chicken and the egg kind of question that we did listen to the informal process in drafting the order, tried to include the topics that were within scope from there, but recognize that that's the informal process. So that was kind of why the motivated us to take this next step. Is it didn't feel like any more conversations within the informal process that we were gonna end up with more agreement. So it kind of felt like putting it on a platform where it was formal comments would drive to that clarity that we were lacking. So again, it's how much process do we have to have a process? It is wondering.
I think the process that we've had so far is adequate. And I think what I'm saying is that I think we could use that better to explain what the ETA, what the legislature intended with the ETA in the form of a rule. For the example I was trying to give is whether it should be measured instantaneously over the course of a year, over the course of 3 years. We received a lot of comments on those, and I think we have a platform now to explain what our initial proposal of what the ETA means. And I don't think we're doing that. Or if we are doing that here, I'm not picking up on it because we're using the same language as the ETA.
Yeah, I guess my response is we're intentionally not doing that because I don't want to say what the legislature intended. What I want to do is write a rule that's supported by a record of the comments that were provided, because everybody else has an opportunity to have their own view of what the legislature intended.
Right. And so this is, I think, an important issue to draw out right now and put in the rule, because if we go out and just say the same thing as the ETA says, we're going to receive the same comments we've already received. And then the answer that we're going to provide in a final rule is not going to be as vetted as it could be if we, put our cards on the table now.
I guess, how are we not putting our cards on the table now through this conversation?
I don't think we're putting them out in this rule. I think that it needs, well, with some things we are, such as the non-compliance. One of the drafts includes a pretty elaborate sort of penalty structure. And that's what I'm looking for. But for example, with the compliance measurement and verification, we're saying here that we're going to measure it with the CO2 emission standards at 3-year intervals. And so I think I'm reading this as we're not adopting an hourly or instantaneous or yearly consideration of the emissions, but we're doing it on a 3-year interval. Is that
That's the second version of the.
Yeah, and my point is we're not adopting anything. What we're trying to do is create a framework so we can learn from others. And then we'll adopt something.
right? And
So the idea that this draft is us adopting something.
Okay.
Is a step too far.
sure, we're not adopting anything right now, but I think that framework, we have there were very good questions asked in bench requests that I think resulted in pretty clear different interpretations. And I think we could start in a more advanced from a more advanced position if we engage with these comments more to figure out what it is that we want to start to propose, and then consider the feedback that is proposed in response to our notebook.
Mr. Lundin, the responses in the informal process are available e-docket, right?
Yes, sir, and they're uploaded to Board Effect as well.
Yeah.
For as background material.
So I guess that's my point, is I'm trying to be open source here. Anything I put in writing here where I'm sifting, sorting, choosing among the informal comments feels too heavy-handed for this process at this moment. We're definitely getting into that by the time we're done. Why do that now? I mean, it feels like we're telling other people how to make their choices. I'd rather, having clarified the scope by saying, here's the things that are elements of the final order, react to that. And you're free to reiterate your previous comment, learn from what you see in there. So anyway, it's kind of how prescriptive to be at this moment. And I don't know how to put more out there than what we have without signaling. And I'm opposed to that.
Okay, so here's the thing is, I don't know what this rule means. I don't know if we're taking into account transactions from a regional market or not. Those are questions that were raised. We're not discussing that here. And so how am I supposed to know how the utility is supposed to comply?
Now I'm starting to understand a little better what you're coming at, and my thought is what's in here is what's in scope. It would be helpful to define the white space that we've gotten to this point and concluded some of these things that people have talked about.
Yes.
Is likely not in scope.
Right.
I would like to do that in a way that you can still make your argument that it should be in scope. So that's why I thought just putting this out here and knowing that you can't really add things after this point defines the extent of the scope. So the fact that what you're talking about isn't mentioned means it ain't scope. And that's my understanding of how these rulemaking processes work, because I've seen them fail by people adding things after the NOPR was issued. So that's an assumption I'm making that could be wrong.
In the spirit of compromise here, what I'd like to propose is I guess the rough draft of the rule. That's the second rough draft, that, we take, paragraph B from non-compliance and we add to this, to, potentially get, a more consensus, draft. I do understand that this is a draft. We're not adopting a rule today. I do think that, the better we can make the draft, the better off we'll be. When I think about a couple of issues, the compliance period, when I read the statute and look at the following sentence, which says compliance shall be measured and verified every 3 years, with the first period commencing on January 1st, 2023. To me, that's pretty clear. And I think in a rough draft of the rule, I would rather see it reflect that. And of course, if the will is to deviate from that later on, then we'll have that discussion. But my feeling is that, that's a closer to, that adheres to my understanding, my current understanding better. Why did I take the penalty out? I don't believe we have a penalty provision in any of our other rules. So it is somewhat unusual. I do think it removes some flexibility from the commission in deciding on a penalty later to have it more or less hard coded. However, I can't argue with the fact that it's easier to remove something than to add it. So, with that in mind, I'm fine with adding it to this version number 2, if that will help make it more agreeable.
Yeah, I guess what I'm missing there is how the compromise offer addresses Commissioner Aguilera's statement.
Well, I guess I want to completely understand. I do tend to think that the issue on regional market transactions is out of scope as I read the statute. I read the qualifying utilities generation and sources of energy procured pursuant to power purchase agreements with a term of 24 months or longer. It is what is in scope as far as the emission standards go. And, to me, that's pretty clear. It's not counting external transactions. So I think that's why it's not in here. But as to your comments, Commissioner Aguilera, around, could this draft reflect more of the process? I'm just not sure what to say about that. I guess I didn't track it closely enough to comment.
Right. So what I mean about engaging more with the comments is in the order to discuss that. So you suggested that the transactions through regional markets are beyond the scope of what you just read. Other parties are saying that they're within the scope. And so my concern is that if we just post the same language that's in the ETA verbatim, we're not solving a controversy. So we should, in the order, say, some parties say it means this, some parties say it means that. This is what we think it means. This is our proposed rule, respond to that. And, you know, I do have my own views about what is included, and, you know, whether I'm struggling with how much I want to say, because I don't want to seem as prejudging, but I am okay, you know, discussing it, and I would prefer to put my thoughts in the order.
Yeah, I guess I'll admit to still being confused because I don't know which order you're talking about. I'm assuming you're talking about the order in front of us today. And then, so anyway, my compromise offer would be, if you want to lead a process to redraft the order for a future meeting, because I'm frankly having a hard time picturing what it is that you're talking about here.
Well, we have
I would
comments.
be happy to let you.
We have
take it
comments
from
that
there.
we don't summarize or, you know.
Right, so
put
if
in-
you could
put in-
take the first draft on that, so we could see, so we're not in a bring me a rock situation.
Right, right.
Would you be willing to do that?
I would be happy to do that.
Again, this is one we don't have a time on. It is a pressing issue to me because we're late. So you can't get started if you can't get finished if you don't start. I don't want to delay implementation of this. But in that spirit, I'd be willing to move to table, relying on your commitment to take the next step expeditiously.
I second.
Yeah, and I would agree that the sooner, you know, we can get started, the better. Not only for the rule itself, but I understand that our Office of General Counsel's practice is to really think about things in a sequential manner, and so I think they're not going to start proposing some other rulemakings until we've you know, started this one. At least that's my understanding.
I don't think we have any that are as close as this one either. Yeah, and then, okay, so anyway, I thought debate on this would be valuable. I hope it has been. Only thing I'd like to reiterate in conclusion is I think it's important that P&M's words match their deeds. So it's just strange to me to be arguing for the 3-year when they're telling everybody they're actively leading in that charge. So. Anyway, did any other questions, discussions before we take a vote? So we're voting on a motion to table.
Right. Commissioner Allison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The order has been tabled.
Commissioners, I have a question concerning the May 2nd open meeting. Would this item be appropriate to bring back then, or are we looking more at the May 16th?
I'm gonna say May 16th is the soonest, because May 2nd, I'm gonna be at a training class. And so I think we're gonna have a meeting on May 2nd, because there's a few procedural orders that have to happen. And I might be able to call into that, but if my vote is required, but we'll have a quorum to deal with these procedural matters on May 2nd. We won't have me until May 16th. Okay, so next on the agenda is case 24-000078 UT, Mr. Fisk.
exactly noon, so I'll say, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good noon. This, of course, is a matter that was on the agenda and was discussed at the commission's most recent open meeting. There are two proposed orders for the commission to consider. One is identical to an order that was provided by OGC at that meeting, which is an order that would have denied the petition for declaratory order by these three petitioners. This petition, of course, concerns, oh, I'm sorry, and the other order is a petition that, an order that would partially grant the petition for a declaratory order. The crux of the issue is the interpretation of subsection 12C of the commission's community solar rule at 17.9.573 NMAC. This is a provision that reads, this is within the process for selection of community solar facilities. That 12C reads, the program administrator shall limit consideration of bids by any one bidder to a maximum total for such bids of 20% of the statewide capacity cap allocated to the applicable utility. In other words, within the 200 megawatts of total statewide capacity allowed for the program for the initial period of the program, the commission allocated to each of the qualifying utilities a certain amount of that capacity not to be exceeded. And so the petitioners urged the commission to provide a declaratory order that would basically overturn what the program administrator, how the program administrator applied this rule in the selection process for projects for applications to proceed to the selected project stage, so they can move further through the process of pursuing their project. The petitioners state that Incline, the program administrator, informed them that they had applied the 20%, what is commonly called the developer cap for 20%, only to the list of selected projects, or the lists for each utility. In other words, if any particular developer, and that goes beyond the subscriber organization, because this many of the subscriber organizations are task specific, project specific LLCs, so that are actually owned by a nationwide or regional developer. This is really aimed at keeping any one developer from having more than 20%. That the way that the program administrator interpreted it was that applies only to the actual list of selected projects and not to the supplemental list, the wait list that was, the next set of projects by rank that would also equal up to 200 megawatts to replace projects that withdrew from the selected list, due to circumstances that would arise. And the petitioners say that wasn't a good application of the rule because it should also have been applied to the creation of the wait list. Because now they say there are a few projects on the wait list that if they moved up would cause the developer cap to be exceeded, and that that's not, there's no reason to let that happen. And to read the rule so narrowly as to only apply to the selected projects as they were at the time. And what the petitioners recommend as a declaratory order is the specific language provided by CCSA, Coalition for Community Solar Access, which isn't actually a petitioner, but had provided this language at a previous time, which would say that you don't, they're not asking the commission to go back and redo the wait list. They're just saying, before you move projects up from the wait list, make sure that it's not one of these projects that would cause the cap to be exceeded. If the developers projects on the selected list went forward and the waitlisted project went forward. And but the order that I provided was presented at the open meeting, most recent open meeting, as OGC's proposed order would simply deny declaratory order saying Incline's interpretation is reasonable. And we know at this point, we do not, the operation of the cap ended with the end of that process, of the selection process. And so, we're going with that interpretation. And if a project moves up, that would exceed the developer cap, it's allowed to move up. Now, we also discussed at that open meeting an order that Commissioner Aguilera had proposed, and he and I discussed, which I think is also an order that the commission could reasonably accept, because subsection C is I don't want to say ambiguous, but it doesn't answer this question specifically, because it says the program administrator shall limit consideration of bids. Well, it doesn't say specifically how that applies to one of the lists versus the other. And so I think it's also reasonable as the order partially granting the declaratory relief would do, to say, yes, that makes sense. The wait list should have been taken into account, 20% cap, when considering the wait list. And as a petitioner say, the wait list and the selected projects list should have been considered as a whole, so that you wouldn't end up having someone move up and violate the cap. And so how the petitioners would propose sort of correcting that error, and this alternative order would do as well, is not to redo the wait list, not to go back and start taking people off and adding other developers or other projects. It would just say, look at this before you move a project up. Look at this, and if it is going to exceed the cap, if it moves up, then don't move it up. But you can leave it on the wait list, because if circumstances do change, for instance, if one of the projects that's on the selected list that belongs to that particular developer pulls out, then there would be room for it. So they're asking for a very minimal way to address this, not having to redo the whole wait list. And that's what the order partially granting would do as well. And then there's another issue that is addressed in the order partially granting the petition, that's not addressed in the order that would deny the petition, because it doesn't have to be. The order denying the petition wouldn't issue a declaratory order, but the order partially granting the petition, would issue a declaratory order. And that declaratory order is based on the language provided by CCSA, but in an unrelated issue, not related to the central issue of the 20% cap, an issue concerning how projects, when projects automatically move up in the wait list. You know, I felt we need to make a correction because it isn't, what the language that CCSA has there was not in accordance with the procedure as provided in 12H of the same, you know, the same subsection, a different subsection of the rule, but the same section of the rule, which says that, you know, projects move up from the wait list to the selected list when a project on the selected list withdraws. And CCSA the language included a statement that if a project on the selected list withdraws or downsizes this project, you know, creating, you know, goes from 5 to 2 megawatts, leaving a you know, space of 3 megawatts. And I had said it last week or the most recent open meeting that, you know, that's contrary to 12H, which only refers to withdrawing projects that withdraw.
Yeah,
And-
excuse me.
Okay.
This is the same presentation we had 2 weeks ago, right? Is there anything
You
new?
know, I almost, the only thing I wanted to add is that, you know, the commission did receive a letter from CCSA that was filed as comments in the matter. And what this order would say about that issue is that paragraph 13 of the order partially granting the petition. And it says, as for the issues raised by CCSA in its comments, it would be premature for the commission to address them in this order. And then it would clarify that both the comments I made at the meeting and the proposed revisions to CCSA's proposed declaratory language only correct for the fact that what CCSA had in their proposal suggested that it's part of the general process. The process providing the rule that when there's a downsizing of a selected project, that also provides an opportunity, just like a withdrawal for a waitlisted project to move up or to automatically move up. But you know, what's clarified here is we're not deciding, the commission, if they adopted this order, would not be deciding anything about can a selected project downsize, can a waitlisted project downsize and apply to take over that capacity. We're not deciding any of that. We're taking that language out just because it suggests that the rule says something that it doesn't. So it would be premature for the commission to opine on that either way, make a decision on that issue, and it's not making that decision. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, you got any questions, discussion?
You know, I'd like to clarify, Mr. Fisk, do we have 3 different orders for our consideration today?
No, Commissioner Ellison, they're just the 2. The one that I sent yesterday before 6 is a revised version of the order partially granting petition, which replaces the order partially granting petition that I provided a couple of weeks ago. So there's just one order partially granting petition, which has, you know, revisions that are brand new from yesterday. And then the order partially denying the petition is the same as it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I guess the position I'm in is I like the initial one better than this revised one.
And as I said, I think both interpretations are reasonable because the rule isn't very specific on this issue. And so I really don't have a preference one way or the other.
Yeah, I guess I have a question. When you say the other one, are you saying you prefer the order denying the petition versus the order partially granting, or you like the old version of partially granting versus the new version of partially granting?
I like the old version of partially granting better than the new version of
Okay.
partially granting. And I do not like the denied
Okay,
version.
so then I guess I'd just be curious to hear why you don't like the changes that came in last night.
Okay. Sure, I'd be happy to explain that. You know, when you look at paragraph 11 in this new version, it states, the commission agrees with the petitioners that the 20% developer cap should have been applied to the selection of projects for the wait list as it was applied to the selection of projects for the selected project list. You know, I'm not quite sure I follow that. And then the last sentence, thus the solution would focus on preventing a project that should not have been included on the wait list from moving up to the list of selected projects. You know, I do not see where that is coming from, because I didn't think that, you know, we were alleging that projects got put on the wait list that shouldn't have been. I thought the whole disagreement here was over, you know, Inclime's interpretation of the 20% cap versus what the petitioners are asserting. And I agree with the petitioners in that, you know, I think the whole purpose here is that we don't want to see one developer have more than 20% of the awarded projects. And, you know, so if that developer has got a project on the wait list, it should not move up as long as they retain that 20% cap. And, you know, as I'm reading this, you know, we're saying something a little different, that those projects should not have gone on the wait list in the first place.
Commissioner Allison, I 100% agree with everything you said. I had, and I have the same concern, and I had suggested some edits, and then it was further revised, but I agree with you that there is confusion as to when this cap applies. I think you and I have explained that it applies at the very beginning when the bids are submitted. And so you never end up applying a cap when there's a selection or a wait list.
Well, you know, let's talk about that. I guess, you know, the rule has the commission as being really detached from the whole incline selection process. And I guess I've been so detached that I really didn't understand how that worked. And yes, I agree that my initial interpretation was that, gee, if we're sorting at the bid acceptance stage, if we're only accepting bids that would get a company up to 20%, then we'd never have a situation in which a waitlisted project would bump them above 20%, right? But, you know, I learned, you know, that is not how this paragraph C in the rule has been interpreted. And in fact, a developer's bids above the 20% cap have been accepted with the idea that you know, a lot of them may just not pan out, and the bids that would actually be selected would be 20% or less. So, you know, I do think our own rules language is unfortunate and not completely clear. But, you know, I do think the way that it's operating now, where, you know, they're allowing a developer, they're accepting bids from a developer that would push it above 20% if they all were selected, makes sense in that, you know, you just don't know which projects are gonna pan out. And the main goal should be that, you know, not to restrict the number of bids, but we don't want to see a single developer have more than 20% of the projects.
Commissioner Olson, may I respond to that? I think a major difference between the version of this order partially granting from 2 weeks ago and this order is that the order from a couple of weeks ago didn't, you know, suggested that when it comes to, you know, that if, you know, we're granting the petition in a way that would say we won't allow any waitlisted project to move up if it would violate the 20% cap, and you know, based on where the ownership of project stands now and throughout the, you know, I mean, the waitlist could be operating for the next couple of years until we actually have a whole set of projects that are actually operating and no one's going to pull out. And when I showed that order to Incline, they said, you know, we're not keeping track anymore of who actually owns what, because this is a period when people get interconnection bills, and you know, and even after that, when the construction starts, where some, you know, a larger developer might come in and, you know, sort of rescue a project that needs you know, a bigger, more well-funded developer. And you know, the rule, what I do think the rule is clear about is that it should only take into account the circumstances that exist when those lists are put together. Because once the interconnection process starts, once construction starts, there will be other considerations where you know, that's why we didn't apply the 20% cap after that. So where, you know, you want, you know, the way that a project might go forward, a selected project, is that someone who is doing a lot of other projects says, we will contribute to this. And so we didn't want to prevent that. And so what is made, and that's why Income said, we're not keeping, we're going, you know, we went based on what the application said. And that's what the wait list was based on, the selected list. And so, you know, we don't know if, you know, a project that's currently on the wait list, you know, there could have been a change in ownership. Probably not at this point, it's pretty early, but this wait list will continue to go on for a long time, like I said, possibly 1 or 2 years. So that was what Incline objected to, is that, you know, the cap only applies to that initial selection project process. And we won't be updating the information. It applies to what was in the applications. And this second order recognizes that in particular, like we agree, the wait list should have taken this into account based on the information that was in the applications at the time. So in order to correct that error, we're not gonna ask who's actually owns what now or at any time in the future when a project's gonna move up. We're just correcting what was wrong with that decision at the time. So it'll be based on, what was in the initial applications. So I think that is made clearer here. Whereas, as I said, Incline objected to the prior version because they said, we're not collecting information anymore. If you're asking us to look at whether a project on the wait list would violate the cap by moving up based on on the potentially evolving ownership, we are not even collecting any information. So this just clarifies, this order is narrower. It's just what the petitioners asked for. They looked at the wait list and identified, they said there's like 4 or 5, they didn't actually name them by name, but they've identified developers who, based on their applications.
Russell, can I interject here?
yes.
Sorry, because I also just want to make sure we don't spend too much time on this. So just to clarify, that situation where a developer can acquire another developer's project, I don't think the rule prohibits that or speaks to that. So that is not something that, in my interpretation, is a limitation or that the project administrator needs to keep track of.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is that
So-
the new order makes it clear,
Yeah.
we're not doing that. We're not
Right,
applying
right.
that.
And so I want to clarify though with Commissioner Ellison, if on the alternate order that we had before yesterday, paragraph 10 says, the one that you say that you prefer. Paragraph 10 says that the most reasonable interpretation of the rule is to consider the projects on the wait list subject to 20% developer cap along with the projects in the pool of selected projects. Do you agree with that sentence? That the rule applies to the wait list projects?
So I guess, again, how I'm, I think the crux of the matter here, I think really goes down to this paragraph C in the rule saying, the program administrator shall limit consideration of bids by any one bidder to a maximum total of such bids of 20% of the statewide capacity cap to the applicable utility. So, I think, we do have a fundamental decision here, whether we're going to say the consideration of bids is the acceptance of bids, so that Incline should not accept bids from a single developer that would put it above the 20% mark, period. Or if we're going to adhere to how that paragraph has been interpreted in practice, which is the consideration of bids is not the same as the acceptance of bids, and we will accept bids above the 20%, but we're gonna only allow, we're only gonna accept, or no, sorry, we're only gonna select up to 20%. And I am inclined to go with that latter interpretation of what we've been doing. And I think Incline has been doing what is expedient. It's easier for them not to have to think about the ownership and to check whether promoting a project from the wait list to being selected would put the developer above 20%. In my view, the big picture is we don't want too much concentration in any one developer. We don't want a single developer to have projects that would put it above 20%. Therefore, if a developer has 20% of selected projects, it's got a project in the wait list, that project should remain frozen. Other waitlisted projects should be selected ahead of it. So, you know, and so I hope, I think that that's what is happening in potentially both versions of this order. However, what, I don't like about the newest version is, I think it's really a policy change, and it's saying, it's interpreting that paragraph C to mean the acceptance of bids, that they shouldn't have accepted bids that would put the developer over 20%. And they made a mistake in including these projects on the wait list. It is really how I'm interpreting that paragraph 11.
Okay. So I'm actually interpreting paragraph 11 differently. But I do believe that the program administrator did this incorrectly. And so the way I'm seeing this is, how can we fix this going forward? I think, for the most part, what CCSA proposed is a good solution, and I appreciate that they came forward with it. The thing, though, is that this is gonna, likely be used again. And so I think we need to provide some direction for the program administrator as to how they need to consider the bids, and what does it mean to consider the bids. And so I was, although not in this version, in a different version, was trying to clarify that I believe that the interpretation of that rule, that the program administrator shall limit consideration of bids, applies to the number of bids that are coming in.
Understanding.
Commissioner Charles, could I just ask a clarifying question, or actually comment on what you said? I agree with what you said about that both of these orders, it's not raised as an issue in the petition whether consideration of bids means no one should have filed applications that were more than 20% in the beginning. That's certainly not what we meant in the rule. For one thing, we wanted to give people developers the opportunity, because they don't know what the results of the scoring and ranking process will be. So, they, if they want to submit, 7 projects, thinking, if all of these are selected, they'll exceed the cap. That's when Incline would take that into consideration and say, okay, your top 3 ranked projects will go on a selected list. Then you should be allowed to do that, because they're then they have it's the most open kind of, because we could, if we said you can't even file more than would be 30%, then there might be projects that they held back that would have been even higher ranked. They don't know that. So we wanted to say, we'll look at every application and select and score them. And then when you look at this is what I consider the consideration process to be. Then when they're ranked against every other project in that utilities territory, if you have projects more than, even have projects that ended up on the selected list that would exceed it, that's where we cut it off. And we cut off your lowest ranked one.
Yeah, and you're making the point that I landed on is you knew what the cap was. And so, yeah, you could limit your bids to 20% of that. The wrinkle is there was an allocation among 3 different service territories. So if you're a bidder that was stronger in one service territory than another, you didn't know that when you submitted your bids. So that's why when I'm looking at this cap, the real goal is diversity of bidders, because you want to have diversity of ideas of how best to develop these projects. To your point, yeah, these projects are probably going to change hands. I bet there's consolidation down the road. So sweating ownership is a kind of a red herring, right? So that's why I liked the order that we got last night, because I think it clarified exactly along those lines, is let's preserve the diversity of the ideas that were presented to us.
Yes, I think that's right.
But getting hung up on whose this is where it gets complicated. And then the fact that if it's not, there's the program cap and then caps for individual utilities is where the math gets.
You know, I guess, you know, how I'm seeing this is that, this, you know, latest order, you know, partially accepting, partially granting the, application. I think it goes well beyond what the applicants were asking for. I think the initial order, was much more aligned with what they were asking for. They wanted, if a developer's got 20% of accepted or selected projects, they didn't want that developer's project to come off the wait list and also be accepted. But what this order does is it says, you know, we'll do that, and we're going to change our policy here, and we're going to make the cap of 20% apply to the acceptance of bids. So, you know, I think, you know, that maybe, I think, you know, that's something that we could discuss, but to me, that goes well beyond what was requested. I would prefer to adopt the earlier order, partially granting, which stayed much more closely to what's being requested. At this time, I disagree with that policy change.
Yeah, Commissioner Ellison, when you said that the policy change, are you talking about a policy change going forward for a next round, or are you talking about a policy change within this round?
Well, I think, you know, what we're saying in paragraph 11, you know, to me, that's outlining a policy that would apply in the future. We're saying that, you know, you should have applied the developer cap to the acceptance of bids. And to me, when we make that statement here, you know, we are making a policy statement as to how we think things should be done. I understand it wouldn't redo the current selection, but to me, it has implications going forward, and I would rather not say that.
Okay, and so you believe that in a future round, they should accept, you know, like, let's say the allocation to one utility is 100 megawatts. They should accept 30 megawatts worth of projects from a single bidder.
You know, I think it's fine to accept bids up to 30 megawatts.
In that case, it seems like maybe you agree that Incline did it correctly.
Yeah, what I'm saying is I think their interpretation is fine. I also agree with respondents that it makes sense to add this additional wrinkle that, you know, we don't want to see a single developer have more than 20% of the selected projects, which has implications for how projects would be promoted from the waitlist.
Can I just comment on that, Commissioner Wilson, because I think it's, I thought I made it quite clear, and when I read it, I think it's clear. Paragraph 11, when the second sentence, the commission agrees with the petitioners that the 20% developer cap should have been applied to the selection of projects for the wait list as was applied to the selection of projects for the selected project list. I don't think that says that that the program administrator was, should not accept it.
Okay,
but
but
I think
how
what it's
about
saying is that
the last sentence, thus the solution would focus on preventing a project that should not have been included on the wait list. Okay, that's saying they did something wrong. They included projects on the wait list that should not have been included.
right, that's exactly what it's saying, but it's not saying that the program administrator should not have accepted, should not even, have done a review. Because that's when you say accepted, I'm thinking that you're saying, no one should even have been filing applications that went beyond 20%. And that, that the program administrator should not have been considering, if reading all five meant.
I mean, the petitioners are not arguing that the project should not have been included on the wait list. They are arguing we should not promote a project off of the wait list if it would mean that the developer would have more than 20% of the selected projects.
To
Well, and I would
clarify,
agree. I'm sorry, but I just want to say one thing. Okay, no.
to clarify, I do think that the petitioners are arguing. They lay out sort of two extremes of the interpretation. And I do think that they are arguing that projects should not have made it to the wait list. But I think what they're also doing, which I appreciate, is proposing a solution, which I think we're all agreeing is acceptable. And so maybe, and this is unfortunately not going to help the program administrator for the next round, but maybe we can focus on just the solution and for now leave out our interpretation.
And I
That's
agree
where
with that.
I'm at. That's
entirely.
where I'm at right now, because we're in a situation, a live situation. We also have a open rulemaking to fix these things in the rules. So how do we solve the problem we got right now and then clean it up for future in the rulemaking? And I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Ellison. It feels like your objection to the thing that came in last night really centers on this idea that the program administrator did it wrong when we're saying that's what they should have done, right? So I would propose, would you be okay with the last night version if we just strike that last sentence from 11? Does that solve the problem?
Well, it certainly helps. That second sentence, Commissioner agrees with petitioners that the 20% developer cap should have been applied to the selection of projects for the wait list. I would strike that sentence too.
Yeah, I honestly would maybe strike this entire paragraph.
Yeah, because I was seeing benefit in, like, for example, paragraph 13, but so that's why I wasn't willing to give up what we got last night. Yeah, I don't have a problem with.
Okay.
You're saying strike the edits on paragraph 11 or the whole paragraph.
Okay, so I think we could keep the first sentence.
And strike the second sentence.
And the last.
And the last sentence. So striking the second and the last sentence in paragraph 11 would be my proposal.
Yeah, and to me, that solves the issue of we want diversity of ideas to vote to the top.
Okay, I can go with that.
Yeah, and you know, I just want to reemphasize the point that I don't think that anything in the rule precludes a project from being acquired from another and the cap applying to that. I think that is a realistic possibility. And I don't think that was the intention of the rule. To limit that after the projects have been selected.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think we would want to do anything to inhibit, you know, the purchase and sale of projects that have been selected and that are going forward.
Yeah, and then I guess just double check before we make a motion, this ordering paragraph B. I think it's fine until we get to the end here about what do you do if you run through the wait list. You go ahead and violate the cap is the way I read that last sentence. And again, I think that's in the spirit of solving the problem we have at the moment. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's on the bottom of page 5 is what I was looking, double checking, but.
Which one?
The bottom of page 5, there's an edit here.
The edit, okay.
Yeah, and if we're striking these 2 sentences from 11, are we being inconsistent with the edit that is there in B?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I think because with the track changes, I don't know what you're referring to. Are you referring to a footnote or part of the ordering paragraphs?
Ordering paragraph B has this big indented paragraph.
Yes.
And towards the bottom of page 5, project will remain on wait list, but may not move to selected bids list. And then the edit starts unless another selected project withdraws at a later time and circumstances have changed such that project cap will not be violated. To me, what I take from that is we're gonna do exactly what we're saying in 11 until we get to the end of the wait list, and then if there were projects that we skipped on the wait list because of the cap, but we still need more capacity, then we'll violate the cap.
Okay, I can remove that, yeah.
No, I'm asking, is that consistent with, because I think it solves the problem we have now. Because next solution would be, oh my God, we need a new wait list.
What I was sort of getting at there is that because the petitioners say a project that we determined shouldn't move up can stay on the wait list, I wanted to explain, you know, why would it stay on the wait list if it's going to violate? And then I think what the petitioners were getting at is that if there are changed circumstances, you know, if one of the projects on the selected list by that same developer is withdrawn, then you could then it could move up in that instance, because that's what the petitioner is saying. They're saying you don't need to redo the whole wait list or even remove the one you've identified as being the one that shouldn't move up. They're saying you can leave it on the wait list. And
Yeah,
so
that's why I'm okay with leaving the edit in, even
Okay.
if we strike these 2 sentences from 11, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware what we're voting on before I make a motion.
Yeah, I would just say, Mr. Fisk, then what you're trying to say is unless another selected project by that developer withdraws?
No, because it could be like, for instance, if the developer withdraws one of their selected projects, they might not be next in the ranking to move up, though they probably. You know what? I think removing that edit is a good idea because it doesn't change the substance. The substance just says they get to remain on the wait list. That's what the petitioners say. And then if people have a question as to, well, why would you leave them on the wait list? We can, like, why are the petitioners say you could do that? You know, we don't need this explanation as to why it might work, why that might be. You know, I mean, it's what the petitioners are asking for. And, you know, some people might respond, well, why would you have it on the wait list at all once you know it's a bad one?
Okay,
And-
so I'm gonna move that we adopt the order partially granting petition for declaratory order as revised last night and further revised by deleting the second sentence of paragraph 11, the last sentence of paragraph 11, and then in ordering paragraph B, deleting the additional language that starts with unless another selected project ends with replace the withdrawing project,
So deleting that.
deleting that.
Yeah, all second.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellison, for highlighting your issues here. It took us a while, but I think we got to common understanding. Is there any other question, discussion?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Allison.
Aye.
The order partially granting petition for declaratory order as amended here has been adopted.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Okay, so where we're at on the agenda is we've got two presentations that have to happen. One is invited guest, Mr. John, who's here. We also have to do our operating budget. Well, we also have to, I think we have to do both items in the discussion and potential action section. Both are necessary. I guess, Mr. John, will you permit us being a little late with your presentation? All right, so then I would recommend let's proceed with the agenda in order. Discussion item number 1 is a presentation by Mr. Montoya.
Hello,
You-
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we sure can. Thank you. You have
Okay,
the
thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join you remotely. Ironically, I'm attending the 2024 Common Ground Alliance Conference and Expo in Colorado Springs, so it aligns with the whole April Safe Digging Month. But out of respect of your time, I'll just read the resolution if that's okay. So
And, it looks like you're hard at it, so don't apologize for your location.
No problem. So the United States Department of Transportation and the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration have long promoted the National 811 Call Before You Dig service. April is hereby recognized as National Safe Digging Month to promote safety around excavation activities in the great state of New Mexico. Whereas the National Association of Regulated Utility Commissioners encourages promotion of April as National Safe Digging Month, and whereas the 811 is a federally mandated FCC designated N11 number to eliminate confusion of multiple numbers and to help save lives and prevent damage to water and gas pipelines, sewer systems, and all other underground utility lines during excavation activities. And whereas the Common Ground Alliance promotes effective damage prevention practices in order to ensure public safety, environmental protection, and the integrity of services. And whereas the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission, Transportation Division, Pipeline Safety Bureau is an active proponent of the 811 one-call service, where one easy phone call to 811 a few days before digging quickly begins the process of getting underground utility lines marked for free and prevents underground utility damage. Therefore, be it resolved that the Public Regulation Commission recognizes April as Safe Digging Month and encourages all homeowners, excavators, and underground pipeline and utility owners to continue working together to improve safe excavation throughout the state of New Mexico. And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would only add that based on the history and the data points that we have available to our industry, by calling 811, it decreases your chances of a line strike to less than 1%. So that's how important this call to 811 is. And I'll stand for questions or anything else that needs to be added.
No, I just want to thank you for bringing this forward and presenting it. I guess commissioners, do you have any questions? I mean, I'm a firm believer in call before you dig.
I don't have any questions, just a very quick story that I was at NARUC in February and attended a panel discussion that was about safe digging, and they posted up different states and sort of their rankings on how well they're doing. And New Mexico wasn't number one, but we were at the very top of the list with some others. And so I want to thank you and your team for that. I think it made me feel proud for our staff. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Montoya, for bringing this to our attention. And I do want to reiterate to everyone, please do dial 811 before digging. Could save a lot of trouble and it could save your life.
Okay, then just to reiterate, the reason we're in discussion and potential action is because Mr. Montoya, you're bringing a request that we adopt the resolution that you read.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I move that we adopt the resolution proposed by Mr. Montoya.
A second.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Montoya. Drive safely.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our FY25 operating budget.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Today, I will be presenting to you the fiscal year 25 operating budget. As we have discussed with each of you in detail, we are going to be receiving a $16.4 million operating budget for fiscal year 25. This includes $12.9 million of general fund, as well as $1.9 million in other state funds and about $1.5 million coming from federal funds. You should have in your packet the printouts from BFM, the Budget Financial Management System, in which we will be submitting. I know when we went over the budget with each of you individually, we went through the roadmap. You will see a small discrepancy that you might have some questions on when you look at the BFM reports, particularly the S8 OpBud. It appears as though our operating budget is 18.3 million. And I just wanted to point out that discrepancy is due to the fact that we had to double count the 1.9 million from other state funds. We have to double count it as transferring out of the pipeline safety fee fund into the operating fund. So it looks like it's a double accounted for when really it's just to allow us to do that accounting transfer in share. We did receive as part of the compensation package, 342,000 of general fund. That does include the for 3% raises and the 9.2% increase in insurance premiums. Also, we will be having to utilize 63,400 out of our other state funds, which is the pipeline safety fee fund, to also account for those increases as well. And also our operating budget does include the 10 new FTEs in the Pipeline Safety Bureau, as well as 3 additional positions in P611. And that I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions right now. Just to, general comment as usual. Thank you for your work on making sure that, you know, our budget is healthy, and thank you.
Appreciate your work on this, Ms. Mascarenhas and your team. It looks very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I do want to thank Lori Narvaez, our Budget and Finance Manager. She did all of the data entry into BFM. Unfortunately, she is in an RFP training, so she's not able to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for highlighting Lori's efforts too. So again, just to reiterate the request, I think process dictates that we've heard the budget, and now you need us to accept it, approve it. I mean, what is the correct word there?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. We do need the commission to approve the budget, and then it will require your signature as the chair.
So I will move that we approve the budget as submitted.
My second.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye,
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
The budget is approved unanimously.
great, thank you, and thanks again. Well, due to the very efficient work of Mr. Montoya and Ms. Mascarenhas, we're actually not that late. So, Mr. John, can you join us? I think you've got some slides that hopefully Patrick Rodriguez is ready with those. Before you start, just wanted to give a little background about what we're doing here. And it was, again, also from attending NARUC in January. I was aware that in some of these big pieces of federal legislation that there were energy communities and that there were particular resources pointed at those energy communities. The analogy for that in New Mexico is our Energy Transition Act. So when the utility sells bonds, they sell enough bonds that it creates a pool of money that then gets distributed. And I saw that the state just recently picked the projects that it will be funding with those that first round of energy transition funds. So anyway, I thought it'd be great to hear from you of the complementary efforts between the state and federal government. We've had a few instances, like I remember with the cybersecurity, it's helpful just for us and the world to know who you are and how to get a hold of you and that type of thing too. So it's not just us trying to learn how our efforts are complementary with what the federal government's doing. It's also just giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So thank you for being here, and you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thank you very much for the invitation to meet with you today. I'm Kevin John from Los Alamos National Lab, and I'm here today to talk about the White House Energy Communities Interagency Working Group and my role as the lead for the Four Corners Rapid Response Team reporting to that IWG. Next slide, please. So the Energy Communities Interagency Working Group started early in the current administration with a recognition of the energy transition that we see happening across the U.S., as well as in New Mexico and communities throughout the Four Corners region. They issued a report very early in the Biden administration to really summarize where there was most urgent need within energy communities, with a specific emphasis on coal communities, both mining and coal plant communities in particular. Next slide, please. So why now? As the chair referred to earlier, we are in a state of unprecedented times with the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, in terms of the opportunities that communities see in front of them with just significant levels of funding. So billions are, on the table right now for tribal and non-tribal communities alike, in these energy communities. Next slide, please. So these are the 12 agencies that make up the Energy Communities Interagency Working Group. I primarily interface with USDA, EPA, Commerce through the Economic Development Association, as well as Department of Labor. But as part of my work, I've touched all of these agencies with the exception of the Appalachian Regional Commission because of their regional relevance isn't sort of applicable to the Four Corners region. But this gives you a sense as to the agencies that are being brought to bear to help communities navigate energy transition. Next slide, please. So I encourage you, if you haven't looked already, to look at the energycommunities.gov website. They have an information clearinghouse that really, I think, summarizes well with the ability to keyword search the funding opportunities there, that are there. These include competitive grant funding opportunities, formula funding opportunities, as well as those funding opportunities that don't require a match. For smaller communities, leveraging a match is sometimes challenging. So those 41 opportunities that you see, listed on the screen, I think are important to our rural, disadvantaged, and tribal communities in particular. The site also details a great deal of information about the Inflation Reduction Act as it relates to tax codes, so solar tax credits, carbon storage tax credits, and so on, that might be relevant to this group. Next slide, please. So the Interagency Working Group has identified a number of energy communities, in particular for the Four Corners area. They were interested in non-metropolitan Arizona and Farmington, New Mexico. And within the red square in the bottom right-hand side, there are 8 coal burning power plants in this region. I'm sorry, 7 in that particular region. 3 plants have closed since 2019. Many are slated for closure by 2032. So this represents a significant number of high-paying community jobs. It represents a major pillar of community economies. And in addition, I think to those impacts, just managing the interfaces that exist within this region in terms of interfaces between counties, between states, between tribal and non-tribal communities makes this particular region especially complex. Next slide, please. So the Energy Communities Interagency Working Group established what they called rapid response teams. There are 3 in operation at the moment. The original pilot was launched in Wyoming. The Four Corners Rapid Response Team was the second. The Illinois Coal Basin represented the third, and there are several now coming up in sort of traditional Appalachian coal areas in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. Really, the rapid response teams are meant to work and interface with coal and energy communities to really make sure that they are connected with these bill and IRA opportunities that I spoke to earlier. Next slide, please. So we kicked off our particular rapid response team effort at the San Juan College School of Energy in August of 2022. We had strong representation from federal agencies. We had Department of Energy, Department of Interior, representatives from climate and economic councils, as well as state and tribal representation. Furthermore, we had attendance and engagement with a number of Farmington regional stakeholders, including Four Corners Economic Development, Navajo Tech, San Juan College, and a number of other community groups. Next slide, please. So as part of our kickoff, we had a number of discussion points that we wanted to sort of engage the group that we assembled. Really, we started off by asking the questions, how do communities see themselves developing economically in the future as they see, energy transition happening around them, and what projects, initiatives, and so on, are important to the development of this region. We addressed a number of key concerns after our kickoff meeting, really following up with regional community members and stakeholders that weren't able to attend. There was a lot of interest in the kickoff event. We only had room for about 80 people. So my first 6 months was really spent on making sure other voices were heard. And we followed up with specific participants who raised key questions and concerns that had agency relevance. For instance, San Juan County was very interested in a rail spur to help bolster economic diversification in their region, and they were struggling with DOT at the federal level in terms of communication. So we helped with that immediately. Next slide, please. So we've developed a phased approach. Stage one, as we've defined it, was really focusing on listening, learning, building our network, establishing sort of a community set of connective tissue, and really earning the community's trust. That stage is still ongoing. We've had over 100 distinct, community level engagements as part of this stage one focus. Stage two is really focusing on connecting community issues, concerns, projects with interagency working group resources. And stage three is really, the process of executing these actions in terms of addressing short-term emergency need. In particular, when the San Juan generating station closed late 2022, we worked with the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions, Secretary Nair and her team in terms of, just providing whatever assistance was needed for their displaced worker plan stemming from the Energy Transition Act. Next slide, please. So in stage one, we conducted sort of a number of areas of focus, really reaching out to colleges, universities, and secondary schools in the area. You can see sort of our data grab in the right-hand side. But common themes that we heard were just general access to broadband, timelines being too long for federal funding receipt, the general need for broad spectrum technical assistance, and because of the layoff of coal plant and coal mine workers, reskilling these workers as quickly as possible was something that was of interest to our academic community colleagues. Next slide, please. From an economic development perspective, again, you can kind of see where we reached out to community teams and leaders in the economic development region. But here we heard the permitting and work plan approvals were taking too long. Broadband, again, was very important for business growth and development. A general lack of infrastructure to attract new businesses. And again, technical assistance in terms of helping, economic developers really gain access to, the billions of dollars that are represented by Bill and IRA funding at the moment. Next slide, please. And lastly, we had quite a bit of interaction with the regional environmental community. In particular, lots of concern about the legacy of orphan wells in the region, a strong desire to transition to solar. And again, this need for capacity in the region to, again, kind of help leverage all the opportunity, that we see sort of in front of us, at the moment with, the bill and IRA funding opportunities. Next slide, please. So in stage two, we've really been focusing on communicating what communities need, in Northwest New Mexico and Northern Arizona. Bottom line, we've communicated all the way up to the White House that this region needs help in addressing capacity at various levels. It's not enough just to, help someone write a grant, but there's need for help to implement and execute said grants once they're awarded. There was a lot of confusion, related to Treasury tax credits. In particular, how IRA provisions could be stacked, with other opportunities. So we've spent a lot of time working with Treasury to sort of get the word out, to communities and how to sort of leverage all these tax credit opportunities. And really, collaboration being a key need, not every community needs to reinvent the wheel. So sharing lessons learned across counties, across states, where applicable, I think has been a significant part of our focus. Next slide, please. In addition, we facilitated through, the Department of Commerce and the Economic Development Association, many community interfaces with the National Association of Counties, as well as the National Association of Development Organizations. We've hosted a number of online forums. You can see the link there. But really, bringing the community forward in these forums to sort of communicate their messages directly to our, federal agency stakeholders. Next slide, please. In stage three, we're bringing federal resources to the communities. So we just wrapped up a series of events in Joseph City and St. John's, Arizona, where they're looking at spring 2025 closure of the Cholla coal burning power plant. We're working with San Juan County and McKinley County officials now in real time to plan events in Northwest New Mexico. We're also working with Department of Energy's Office of Indian Energy, as well as the White House Council on Native American Affairs, through their memorandum of understanding efforts with both Navajo Nation and Hopi Nation. I was just in Hopi Nation last week as part of this MOU process. We're routinely fielding questions and providing briefings to White House, U.S. Congressional Senate staffers, as well as agency leads as requested. And again, we serve as a technical resource in terms of what the national laboratories can bring to bear to help communities navigate energy transition. Next slide, please. In addition to the first report that I showed, earlier in this presentation, the Interagency Working Group has issued a second year report and likely is about to issue a year 3 report. So the effort continues. I think beyond the current administration, the MOUs established with Navajo and Hopi Nations have sort of a life cycle of 2028. The bill and IRA positions will endure, assuming we have an administration change at the White House level moving forward. So, the goal is to sort of continue to help our energy communities navigate these opportunities beyond the next election cycle. Next slide, please. So as we look forward, I think we continue to focus in, helping New Mexico in particular as we, sort of begin to, look at the demolition of the San Juan generating station and sort of, that region's rebirth in the form of several, fairly large solar plant installations, that are being developed. We continue to stay in a very active listening and learning mode. We're building our network. We're learning from our rapid response team colleagues in terms of the lessons learned they've compiled as part of their efforts. And we're facilitating community events where we're bringing federal resource direct to the community where and when appropriate. And that's it from me. I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. John? Yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming and, you know, highlighting that our region is complex and that response to that is this rapid response team. And so appreciate your efforts. I mean, this is an important issue for New Mexico and as you highlighted, there's intersections with the work we're doing. So in your work, if you find things that Public Regulation Commission can do to enhance the efforts, please let us know.
Fantastic. And I'll leave some flyers that sort of outline the interagency working group if that would be of interest.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And please get Corey's business card. So
Okay.
you can
All right.
contact her.
And I might briefly add, just so you know, we also deal with broadband at the PRC.
Fantastic.
And so
Okay.
I think, you know, it could be worthwhile to hear more about, you know, what you're hearing from folks, you know, because we are approving Universal Service Fund projects that go into the Navajo Nation wireless broadband.
Yeah, I think one of the things, you know, as we've interacted with San Juan County and Four Corners Economic Development, in particular, they've recently hired a broadband specialist. So they've received funds from a philanthropic group called the Just Transition Fund. They're a group that works specifically with coal communities. And I think this broadband position is really meant to I think understand and consolidate all the broadband projects that are both tribal and non-tribal, and really trying to, you know, understand where the linchpins might be, where, you know, there might be need for focused help. I know that they are planning some form of broadband summit in the June timeframe. So I'll certainly keep you apprised of that effort as it develops. So certainly appreciate the broadband connection. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck with that rail spur.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so next on the agenda is our FY24 CRD compliance report. We have Mr. Jimenez here.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for having me this afternoon. So it's that time of year again for the quarterly update. So I think I should be able to get you guys back on schedule here pretty quick. I was able to streamline this report to give you some good and concise information on it. The first page, as you can see, Patrick, if you could, please. Next page. The type and number of complaints that we have received since the beginning of the year, January 1st, 2024. We've had 178 total complaints. 146 of those were utility complaints. 32 telecom, 88 electric utility complaints. 4 of which of those 88 electric utility complaints were solar related. 10 water complaints, 10 gas and propane complaints, and 6 cable complaints that we received. And of those 178 total complaints, we have received 32 transportation complaints. 23 of those would be tariff and regulations, 6 damaged property complaints, and 3 billing questions that we've had there. Next page, please, Patrick. And I know you all here at the commission in the open meeting aren't able to speak or discuss some of the current events that are going on. But this is what the CRD's team is following, some of these hot topics, if you will, through our quarterly meetings with the utilities and some of the complaints that we've been receiving. These are some of the stuff that we've been following and keeping update with. The first one was JMEC billing. we've had some questions on that. Some complaints coming in. EPE, AMI meter transition, they've had that transition going on since the end of last year. So we're getting some questions and concerns on that. The New Mexico Gas Company proposed rate increase hearing. Of course, we're always getting questions on these rate increase hearings that are coming before you all. And the XL and PNM emergency outage plans. We've had some complaints coming in from those outages, and we do get some questions and concerns regarding that. Next page, please, Patrick. And at the so far up to current, since the beginning of this year, January 1st, the total amount of recovered costs for the consumer is just over $21,000 that our team was able to mediate and arbitrate for consumers of New Mexico. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Jimenez. As always, we've said this plenty of times at these meetings that and deeply appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions on this presentation?
I don't have any questions. Also just want to, reiterate the thanks, and you take care of a lot of issues that never even need to reach us. So thank you for that, but
Sure.
mostly thank you for helping the customers.
Thank you, Commissioner.
What is JMEC?
That's Jemez Mountain Electric Co-op.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I should have.
Is there some particular issue that's causing complaints with them?
Well, we've had some concerns and questions coming in. I don't want to get too much in the weeds with the details. But we've had some concerns, and there was a story done in one of the local newspapers just a couple of weeks ago. So since that story's aired, we've had some concerns coming in from some of the constituents, and we're in touch with JMEC's executive team to try to kind of cut it off at the path, if you will, and try to just continue to be informative to the consumers and constituents in that area.
And with the utility complaints, is there any theme that you're seeing to the electric utility complaints, or is it just a whole variety of things?
Usually with the utility complaints, they're mainly billing issues. So it's usually the constituent or the consumer having questions on their billing, where we have to relay the information back up to the utility and get the information back to us so we can kind of see what's going on with the account. Sometimes there's estimation going on where the utility had to estimate for whatever reason, and then we'll get that information back from the utility, be able to communicate that back to the consumer, and then on our end, just ensure that there's no violations per our rules, to make sure they're kind of on the up and up, if you will, with everything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, thank you all.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Since you've been hearing from a lot of staff today, I will keep it brief, but I did want to use that presentation from Mr. Jimenez and also from Ms. Mascareñas to highlight what a great job our staff is doing, and the resolution from Pipeline Safety Bureau as well. We've been asking them to do a lot of what they might consider extra work over the past several months as we implement our strategic plan. And they've really been diving in and taking a chunk out of it. So I do want to appreciate them for that. Some of it is extra work now to lead to less work later. And some of it is just the work that goes into changing what's always been. So they're doing great, and I appreciate them working so hard on that. About the implementation plan for the strategic plan, I just want to highlight a couple of things that are forthcoming that we should watch for. we have implemented quarterly in-person meetings for each of the divisions, and we've started to see those kick off in April. And so far, so good. And I will say, it's been a pleasure for me to be attending those, for the ones that want me there. And some of the division directors thought maybe the first one will go gently and not have the chief of staff there. So that's been an exciting experience, I think, for all of us. And I will say there are some divisions that had never met each other in person. So this is a nice opportunity for them to do that. Secondly, I'd like to let you know, because I will be asking for your help, and also let the agency know that we're going to be implementing a mentorship program, a formal one, in the coming months. Our implementation plan requires it to be done by the end of May, I believe. So watch for an email coming out around that. I do anticipate that we're going to take a staff survey so we can make the program tailored to the needs of our agency and make it really thoughtful. But I will be asking for commissioners to participate as mentors for that. And then stepping a little away from our implementation plan, although there are plenty of goals related to that on this subject, we're back on the legislative treadmill, so to speak. We've, through various sources, been being asked about legislative priorities, next legislative session, what do we want to do? As you just heard from Ms. Mascarenas, we're getting near the end of one budget cycle, and so we're going to start thinking about the next budget cycle. And so I just want to tee that up for us all to start thinking about. We heard from Mr. Gillespie last month about input from staff on legislative ideas. So we're in the process of collating those and prioritizing those and getting a plan in place for those. So that's my update, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. And while you were giving that, I was thinking about just this week, we're across the street at that conference, NMSU Current Issues. Quite a few staff were able to attend, which was great. So I think one of the takeaways is it's not just what we're seeing in front of us now, but the world around us is changing constantly and rapidly. So it's great that folks are starting to think beyond the page that's in front of them, especially since I know capacity's been an issue in this agency, but we have a lot of new employees, as you've been highlighting over the months. And so it's really, again, an exciting time to be here, and grateful to hear about your efforts to help build the staff in their professional and personal capacities.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Next item is communications with commissioners. I think it's your turn to go first, Commissioner Ellison, from my random memory access process.
It doesn't matter, but thank you. I guess one thing comes to mind that I might mention. I've been in a couple conversations regarding the Western Resource Adequacy Program, or WRAP, that are interesting. I might just quickly say a word about what it is, just for anybody listening. The idea behind WRAP is not a contingency reserve. So it's, if a utility has a power plant that has a unexpected outage, WRAP would not immediately be available to cover in the same hour or even same day. But it is a resource adequacy program such that if a utility is experiencing an unexpected shortfall, say, that plant goes out and there's a big problem with it and it's going to be out for a week, then you could get a chunk of power dispatched starting even the next day for a week. So it's insurance against some something unusual happening. It's not a replacement for being prepared and for being resource adequate. And the plan was for this program to go live or to be binding on the member utilities by the summer of 2026. It looks almost certain that that is not going to happen. And they are simply not getting really a critical mass of utilities to be willing to commit to that binding operation. And, you know, there are a couple of reasons behind that. One is it looks like, well, if a utility or balancing area is short on capacity, then, you know, becoming a part of RAP and having that binding would mean that they, you know, they would have to build capacity or be subject to fines straight away. And so the thinking was that there are only a couple of utilities in the West that were in that position, but now it looks like a lot more than people thought are in that short position. And so they don't want to commit to RAP and then get assessed fines from day one. So, you know, that's a worrisome sort of development. And the RAP organization can't even tell us what percentage of Western utilities are in that position, because they say that they're not getting adequate data. They're not getting full disclosure. Even though there's a FERC tariff for RAP, the utilities are not, some utilities are not filling out all the information in the requested detail. So, you know, that's one issue. And I think some state regulators in the West may be questioning how much value there is in the RAP program. And so they're sort of putting a question mark around that. So, you know, these are conversations that are going to continue. But I just wanted to flag that for your attention as an issue. And I would like to ask, I do think we should ask our utilities on Friday in the resource adequacy discussion to give us an update on their thinking around RAP and where they're at in that process.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Aguilera?
So yeah, the one thing I have to raise is somewhat related. You know, I just wanted to make you aware that there is a possibility that the Markets Plus States Committee will submit some sort of comment to FERC based on the recent filing that SPP has made. The comment period for that ends on the 29th. And I have a meeting with the MSC tomorrow to just further discuss whether we will submit comments. Those comments are not from commissions as a whole. So they're from the Markets Plus States Committee. And so there would be nothing for us to vote on. But I did want to make you aware of that, and that I posted a very preliminary draft of those comments on Board Effect, so that you can see the direction. Again, those are not final, and so we're still working on that, and even still we'll discuss whether to submit comments at all, but the possibility exists, and so I wanted to make you aware of that. And related to that, and what Commissioner Ellison was talking about, Markets Plus includes a requirement that if you are a participant then you also have to join the rep because, and I believe EDAM is the same way because they were sort of developed to work together. That could also be a reason why entities haven't joined yet. With like a binding commitment. If they do intend to join one of these day-ahead markets, they would be required to have a binding commitment in RAP. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Then I just wanted to highlight that, there's quite a few conferences and training coming up that some of us will be attending. Next week, I've got two, part of the Northwestern University Electricity Dialogue. There's a program in Chicago called the State RTO Partnership, Policies, Markets, Reliability, Energy Transition. So that's Monday and Tuesday. And then starting Wednesday through the end of the week is the spring CREPC-YRAB meeting. I think all three of us are going to be there, and that is going to be an interesting conference because of exactly what both of you two have been talking about here. There's a lot going on in the West, and so it'll be a big topic of conversation. So be there. And then the following week, I'm going to New York for regulators' opportunity to ask investors questions directly. So try to understand kind of some of what we see in rate cases when, looks like Stockholm Syndrome as the arguments that we get from utilities, but try to get a deeper understanding in that. So, and I'm able to take Gabriela DeShano with me to that class. So I'll be out on the road for about 2 weeks, and that's why the May 2nd meeting will be hopefully mostly procedural. And then as part of what's going to be talked about at this CREPC-YRAB meeting, there was the Markets Plus released their tariff, and then also on April 10th, this West-wide Governance Pathways Initiative produced a straw proposal on April 10th. So if you remember, that was a concept that was initiated by a number of Western commissioners writing a letter saying, in order to maximize customer benefit as regional markets grow and form, it's having the biggest possible footprint is the way to get the best, largest potential benefit. So that's evolved into how do you create regional market designs that can include California. So there's a straw proposal out there with requests for comments on that proposal. And, the regulators who wrote that letter and got it started, we are cognizant of the fact that someday this thing might turn into something, and utilities that we regulate might join this thing. So trying to not be designers of it or do something that might get me recused from voting on something like that in the future. So there's a discussion, should the state regulators also provide comments on that straw proposal? And it's an interesting thing. I was amazed at how that idea took off. This launch committee formed. It's a broad group of a lot of industry stakeholders across the West. They were quickly able to raise their own money, hired a law firm that did an analysis of what type of things can happen. What you'll see if you review those documents is can we create this thing called a regional organization, an RO, that could implement a market. And so that would be different than Cal ISO. And so then what are the boundaries or things that have to change for RO to run a market that Cal ISO can participate in? But in the meantime, while all that was happening, they came up with some governance initiatives that I think improve the status quo. So what you'll see when you look through that document is this thing called Step 1, and that's changes to governance around EDAM and other, like the BOSER that can happen now. And then it's how do you take the next step? Whether it actually gets to this fully realized idea of an RTO, similar to what Markets Plus is doing. That's still open conversation and several steps away. So expect when you go to Colorado next week, there will be a lot of discussion on that. So just highlighting that for, just provide information on where the thing's at. And then similar to what Commissioner Aguilera described, it could be there's a group of state regulators that want to issue comments on that, but that decision hasn't been made yet, so. And then if you're really interested in that, there's a stakeholder call tomorrow, and the information is housed at the West-Wide Governance Pathways website. Okay, so that's my list. Anything else, commissioners, or?
Yes, I wanted to mention one other thing. I think it's after the Krebs meeting, so in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be attending a Commissioner Water Policy Forum that's being hosted by the National Association of Water Companies. And that's in Dallas, and so I will be at that. And then one final thing to note is I also have some planned vacation time at the end of May and beginning of June. And so I asked our general counsel if, he can be gracious enough not to put too many things on that agenda. Obviously, if they have to be on there, they will. And I do intend to sign on to the meeting that, but I will not be physically present here.
Thank you. Okay, so is there any objection to adjourning this meeting? And then just reminder, in just less than 15 minutes, we're going to be back here for a public comment session on PNM's grid mod application. So with that, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.